My latest book is called The Colony Club. It is the Colony Club, and it's still in existence, and they do great work. It's in Manhattan. Um, I'm I'm enthralled with Manhattan. I always have been. I always find these things that are wonderful about it. The Colony Club came about. Well, the reason I even thought of doing it, first of all, was I had been trying to do a story about two of the characters in this book, Elizabeth Marbury, who was like one of the biggest theatrical agents of that time, 1900, early 1900s, for Europe and for America. I mean, it was amazing what she did. And her protege and companion, Elsie de Wolfe, who was known as the best dressed actress on the Rialto, which was the theater district at that time, but her acting was ish. But I couldn't find the fictional hook that I wanted to take them down. I needed some characters. Everything I tried just wasn't right. Then one day I was looking at a podcast by a colleague, Alex Rickloff, who had written a book, Last Light Over Oslo, about Daisy Harriman when she was minister of Norway and at the beginning of World War II. And she mentioned this book that she had used, and it was called Ladies and Not So Gentle Women. And I went, I've been using that book too. So I hauled out the book and said, let me see what Daisy had to do it. And there was a section that said, and we have to go talk about Daisy's club. So I went to the library, somebody, and I found her memoir called From Pinafores to Politics, which is a great title. And I found that when she was a young society matron, she was summering in Newport, like most of the society people for those times. And her townhouse in the city was being renovated, and she needed to go into town to do a few errands. So she had her secretary call the Waldorf to book a room. And the secretary came back and said, I'm sorry, the Waldorf says they don't cater to unaccompanied females, even if they are Mrs. Harriman. So she says to her husband, well, that's just not fair. You can go to your club anytime, if you don't want to stay at the hotel. And then she goes, aha, we need a men's club for women. So the next day she goes out to all of her friends and invites them to tea. And they concoct this club. And of course, it immediately gets out of hand because these are the upper society people. And, one says, okay, well, we can have, we'll have lunch where we can go without having a gentleman accompany us, and we'll have rooms to stay over if our friends come in and we can't accommodate them. And well, we should have a gymnasium, that way we won't have to go to Mr. So-and-so and book in advance. And well, if you're going to have a gymnasium, I want a pool. Well, if you're going to have a pool, I want a concert hall. If you're going to have a concert hall, I want a ballroom. And it just skyrocketed. So she knew that she would have to have help, and this is where Bessie and Elsie come in. It was an immediate scandal because, men and the patriarchy and the preachers were going, they'll be in there smoking cigars and drinking port before you know it and ignoring their children and not. But what they actually did were they were very active in almost every political and social movement at the time, because where you find ladies having tea, you find the suffragist, and you find Anne Morgan, who was JP's daughter, was very into child labor laws because they were practically nil, and they suddenly blossomed, and they had all sorts of people come in and talk. They branched out and became physically active. Until then, their philanthropy was mainly you asked your husband to write a check to your favorite charity. Now they were hitting the streets. At one point later than in this book, they marched with the women's garment workers who, were working in terrible conditions in sweatshops. But when they marched, the owners would hire thugs and the police who would beat these young women who were marching down the street. So the Colony Club decided they would dress in their finest furs and their fanciest hats, and they would walk alongside the garment workers because the police would not dare to harm them, and they were right. And the newspapers called them, sort of in a jocular way, the Mink Brigade. But it stuck, and it became very powerful.